right, should I start now?
Yeah, you're up.
Okay. Okay. Hi everyone, this is Bryce from TechNibble. I think most of you know me from my articles and that sort of thing. Welcome to the Advanced Techniques and Virus Removal webinar by Ken Dwight. Ken actually showed up on my radar about 2 months ago and showed me one of his older pre-recorded webinars, and I found it very interesting, and I think it's a good opportunity for all of us to learn something new related to virus removal. I mean, it's getting a lot harder to remove nowadays, and it's not just about opening picture.jpg.exe and then once your clients run it, there's just an executable sitting in the background, which you can see on Process Manager. I mean, we're talking about rootkits that come up as drivers nowadays, and as we all know, generally the viruses and malware is always one step ahead of the antivirus software. So it really does pay to know what you're looking at, and even when the antivirus product doesn't show up, doesn't detect the virus, then it's good to have that knowledge to be able to doubt that and just say, hey, I still think something's going on here, even if it's not detected, and we can learn something here to gain the knowledge to actually see that and detect viruses ourselves. So take it away, Ken.
All right. Well, thank you, Bryce, and thank you all for being on the webinar. I do need to apologize for some people that aren't here. This is normally set up to accommodate up to 1,000 people, and for some reason it cut off at 101. So those of you that are on can consider yourselves to be in the privileged class. And the good news is it's being recorded, and so the people that were not able to get in will send the link. But between now and the second session next week, we'll take care of that and be sure that everybody that wants to can be on next week. So, as you know, this is a two-part webinar, and we're going to be covering a lot of ground. As Bryce says, I've done these a lot in the past, and it was one part, and some of the most common feedback I got was, well, we wanted more. And so, rather than tie everybody up for an extended period of time, one time out, I've broken it down into two parts, and we'll give you a logical breaking point and some homework at the end of this session if you're interested in what we're talking about. I haven't had the privilege of meeting most of you personally, so here's a little bit about me. In spite of that incredible youthful appearance, I'm actually an old guy. I've been in the computer business for almost 50 years now. February 12th will be 49 years that I started as a programmer trainee. Computers didn't look like this back then. Of course, it was all punch cards and to get your printout the next day, and it was a whole different world. But I've been part of it ever since, and I got into the PC end of things pretty early as well. Bought my first IBM PC in 1982. Any of you that weren't around back then, IBM announced their personal computer in 1981, and that was the official name of it, the IBM Personal Computer. And of course that term PC, personal computer, has stuck ever since. I also jumped into Windows fairly early. I was not one of the Windows 286 or Windows 386 users, or 1.0, 2.0, but once Windows 3.0 came out, that's when I jumped into it, and then fortunately, that evolved into 3.1 pretty quickly, then Windows for Workgroups 3.11, and I've been part of it ever since then. Developed especially in viruses and malware back in 2002. And that wasn't something that I just woke up one morning and decided I needed to do. It really came about as a result of a client experience. Got a call from a client that said, Ken, there's some strange things happening with our computers. Can you come take a look? And this was a small dental practice with 4 computers and a peer-to-peer network. I believe it was Windows 95. Might have been Windows 98 at the time. But at any rate, as I got into it, it did turn out to be a virus problem. And viruses weren't new back then. As you know, they've been around for over 25 years. But prior to that, they were vandalism, pranks, bored kids, whatever. They weren't really that big of a deal. And that was the first time that I had seen a virus actually making money from its efforts. The particular virus that they were infected by was called KLEZ, K-L-E-Z. And as far as I was concerned, that was a game changer. And it also gave me the idea that I really needed to try to get the word out, let people know that viruses weren't what they thought they were anymore. And you really needed to pay attention to this stuff, do something about it. So that's kind of when I got on my soapbox and started trying to spread the word to the unwashed masses. It was mostly the end users back then, and anywhere from half-hour to hour-long presentations at chambers of commerce and Rotary clubs, that sort of thing. But one thing led to another, and somebody said, well, you ought to write a book about that, and I eventually did, which you'll see next. But over the last 15 years, I've done a lot of training for end users, but mostly for geeks. And when I say a lot, so far I have graduates in 48 states, 2 territories, and 5 foreign countries. So some of that's been in person, a lot of it's been remote. But I am based in Houston. That's where I am sitting today and talking to you all around the world. So appreciate you being here. This is the book I wrote, Bug-Free Computing, Stop Viruses, Squash Worms, and Smash Trojan Horses. Again, this was mostly for end users. It was written in 2005 and updated in second printing in 2006. It did win an award. That little sticker over there is from Independent Publisher Magazines, what they call an IPPY award. So I was pretty proud of that. Again, it was an end user audience, not so much technical. And 2005, 2006, that doesn't sound like that long ago until you stop to consider there's nothing in there about Facebook. There's no such thing as social networks back then. So just one indication of how much and how quickly things have changed, and they do change in this industry. At one point, it was actually available on websites in 11 foreign countries. As far as I know, it was never translated into any foreign languages, but I might not necessarily know about that. But anyway, it's out of print. I'm not pushing the book today. I don't even have any to sell if I wanted to. But I mainly show it here to let you know I've got a lot that I could say on the subject. The book was 186 pages. So yeah, I could talk for a long time about viruses and related issues. A little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way first in terms of the way that the webinar is organized. First, I do encourage questions. And the way to do that is through the question box in your control panel. Bryce will be monitoring that and responding to some of them directly, and others he'll pass along to me as necessary. With the number of people we have on here, it's not practical to have audio feedback, so Bryce and I are the only ones that have working microphones. So you can yell into the microphone if you like, but we can't hear you. One of the things that I'll just let you know is I've done this a lot of times. I've lost count of the number of webinars like this that I've presented, but enough that I pretty much know what questions are likely to come up. I'll be anticipating most of them. But anything that occurs to you that you'd like more information about or clarification or whatever, go ahead and ask, or just hold on to it till the end, and there will be an official Q&A session at the end. If there's something that you've been holding that I haven't covered, you're welcome to ask it then. I expect this session to go about 45, 50 minutes, something less than an hour, but we will hold it open for Q&A as long as any of you want to stick around. A little bit about who this is intended for. It's people that do tech support for a living. Now, that may be if you're in an outsourced IT support organization, or you're providing services to mostly small and mid-sized businesses, and maybe overflow support to larger organizations that have their own in-house IT support departments. I do have people in the in-house IT support departments that can benefit from this information also. They're not the ones that I primarily target for it, but they're certainly welcome. And if some of you fall in that category, welcome. Glad to have you on. People that really get a lot of benefit out of it are your corner computer stores. People that are doing computer sales and repair. Some of those, 90% of their business is related to viruses and malware. And finally, there are people like me, computer consultants that are dealing individually with clients, whether it's, again, small businesses, business owners, home users, large businesses, or whatever. And I really want to emphasize that point. I am in the trenches myself. I'm out there doing this stuff. This isn't just some collection of things I found on the internet and turned into a webinar. So I'm doing it and learning myself all the time. We're going to accomplish a lot of things today and next week. I'm going to start off by clarifying some terminology and definitions. Of course, there are a lot of words and terms that are used and sometimes misused, so I want to be sure we're all on the same page, using the same words to mean the same things. I'll talk about how different malware is today from what it was a few years ago, and certainly from 10 or 20 years ago. As part of that, I'll talk about the traditional repair procedure, what the average tech does when they're dealing with a malware issue these days, and why a lot of that doesn't work anymore. As malware has gotten more sophisticated, it's cut off more and more of the avenues that a technician normally uses to deal with them. I will offer alternative solutions and a whole possibly new way of dealing with it that you may not have seen before. So what's in it for you? Why should you spend the next hour or so of your life, and again next week? That's a good question. I think I've got a good answer for you, because I will actually be sharing knowledge you can start using today. And literally things we'll be talking about you can start using as soon as the webinar is over. Another thing you'll find from this, and if you're not on my newsletter or email list, I invite you to be, is what you'll find is anything you get from me has been really distilled down from a lot of information out there. I've filtered out the things that don't apply, or they're not accurate or out of date or whatever. And along the way, you'll get my insight on all of these issues. So that's pretty much the only place you can get some of the stuff I'll be talking about. Again, I invite you to sign up for my free newsletters and articles, blog posts. I don't do nearly as many of those as I'd like to or as I could. So if you sign up for the newsletter, it's not like you're going to get 2 or 3 spams a day from me. Generally about once a month is all I can muster up to get a blog post out. Sometimes more frequent and sometimes less. But anyway, that's kind of the order of magnitude we're looking at. At the end of the second session, there will be an offer for you to get more in-depth information if you like. If you like what you see and want to drill deeper, that opportunity is available to you, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. So here are some of the specific things we'll be talking about and information you'll take home with you from the webinar today and then next week as well. Start off by talking about how to handle rogues differently from traditional viruses. We'll talk about what rogues are, what they look like, how you deal with them, and why it matters. We'll also talk about how to know when a computer is infected by a rootkit. As you know, rootkits are the most deeply buried type of malware, and they're also, in a lot of cases, the hardest to detect. But I'll give you 3 telltale signs to let you know when you're likely dealing with the rootkit, and actually a 4th that shows up sometimes as well. Very importantly, I'll talk about how to keep you from spending hours scanning an infected computer. By far the most common approach that the average tech takes is to scan with this and scan with that and scan and scan and scan and scan. So that's where all the time is spent, and it may or may not be effective. Also very importantly, how to keep it from coming back after you've removed it. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. The tech gets a machine in that's infected, runs a bunch of scans, they find things and clean it, and the tech's very happy with himself or herself, returns it to the client, then they get a call back the next day, so well, it's back, or something new that is also along the same lines. Now, granted, when that happens, it could be because the user is doing the same stupid thing they did that got them infected in the first place. But it's not necessarily the user doing stupid things anymore that gets them infected. And if it comes back, there's a good chance it came back because the tech didn't really rip it out by its roots. So we'll talk about that. But I want to talk about the virus repair opportunity because it is exactly that. It's an opportunity for you and for me. When it happens, the client or the user is in trouble. They've got a problem, they know it. In a lot of cases, it's a very high visibility problem. They usually assume it's their fault, and it usually is, but even at that, in a lot of cases, you really kind of can't blame them because it's been something they've done that was so cleverly presented that it seemed like the normal, natural thing to do. As you know, in a lot of cases, they can't do anything until the problem is solved. So literally their whole business could come to a screeching halt until the problem is taken care of, and so they're looking to you as the expert. It's your chance to be a hero. That's the good news, but there's a bad news side too. As the slide says, you're tired of losing money or clients, and it could be both, on virus repairs. And when I think about this, it reminds me of a quote from an old football coach. Now, when I say football, I am in the U.S., so I'm talking about American football, but I think most of you will understand the concept. There was a coach years ago named Coach Darrell Royal, the coach at the University of Texas, and he said anytime you throw the football, there are three things that can happen, and 2 of them are bad. And it's kind of the same thing with virus repairs. Yes, you could be a hero. Everything could turn out well or not. So here are some of the things that could happen that you wish wouldn't. Most commonly, it'll take a lot more time than you can bill for. As a practical matter, when it comes to virus repairs, virus cleanup, a couple of hours is about the most that the client will stand still for. Now, if your rate is really, really cheap, you might be able to bill for a little bit more than that. But the point is that at a reasonable rate, when you get more than a couple of hours, then the client starts doing the arithmetic, well, gee, I could buy a new computer for not much more than that or whatever. And you know and I know that's not really a fair comparison, but the point is that's the way users think. So you have to be aware of that. There's really a definite limit to how much you can charge for a virus cleanup or repair. Unfortunately, in some cases, you just can't fix it. They've gotten too sophisticated, too well hidden, too well protected, or whatever. Or, unfortunately, sometimes your attempts at repairs can make things worse. You introduce whole new problems. Sometimes it's like playing whack-a-mole. You knock one out, and another one pops up somewhere else, and all the way up to the dreaded blue screen of death. So that's definitely a possible outcome you need to be aware of and kind of prepare for. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the tech decides the best way to solve the problem is to wipe and reload, nuke and pave. Wipe everything out, start all over again. Horrible, horrible solution for most of your clients, especially the small business and home user clients. In enterprise systems, kind of a different issue, but that's typically not who we're dealing with this type of problem. And again, once you think you've got it fixed, it could come back. So those are some of the things that could go wrong with a virus repair. On the other hand, it's real easy to describe the ideal outcome. You will find and remove all malware on the infected system. It'll stay clean for a reasonable period of time. Now, a reasonable period of time doesn't mean forever, but I think 30 days is a realistic expectation for how long it should be before that virus or a new one comes back. So, yeah, in my opinion, if you do your job right, you can offer a 30-day guarantee on malware cleanup. Ideally, when you're done, the computer will run faster than it ever did before it was infected in the first place. And as long as we're talking about the ideal world, you'll do all this in less than 2 hours. I know some of you may be shaking your heads, yeah, right, in your dreams, 2 hours, sure. Well, believe it or not, that's actually a very conservative estimate. So that's what we're shooting for, and it's absolutely doable. So on to some definitions. First of all, the overall catch-all phrase that describes all of this is malware. Malware is malicious or malevolent software, software that will hurt you, or more accurately, software that will hurt the machine, the client or the user's computer. And frankly, there are times I will use the term virus when malware would be more appropriate, because malware, again, is the term that encompasses all of this. So all viruses are malware. All malware is not necessarily a virus. But we'll talk about it all kind of in the same breath. But a virus, by definition, is a program that spreads from one computer to another, period. It doesn't say anything about doing any damage or anything beyond that. If it spreads from one computer to another, that fits the textbook definition of a virus. And again, the early viruses weren't malicious. They didn't cause any harm. They were more pranks or, ha-ha, got you, I'm a cool programmer, whatever. Obviously, the ones we're concerned about today are the ones that do damage. Within that overall category of virus, there are two subclasses that you saw the subtitles of my book, worms and Trojans, or Trojan horses. But there are particular characteristics of each one you need to be aware of. A worm is a virus that spreads from one computer to another and does damage along the way. So, by definition, a worm is malicious. You need to get rid of it. But there's another important distinction here as well. That is that a traditional virus infects an existing file on the computer, most commonly a Windows component, an Office document, or something like that. A worm, on the other hand, does its damage by putting an additional file or files on that computer. So, there's good news and bad news here. The bad news is the worm is, by definition, more malicious. The good news is once you've identified it, you can delete it and stop the damage. Where on a traditional virus, you're going to have to either disinfect it or more commonly get a clean, uninfected copy of that module, in some cases reinstalling an application, or in extreme cases even reinstalling the operating system. Unlikely you'll need to do that these days, but it's something that some techs do or think they have to do. The other one there is a Trojan or Trojan horse. As the name implies, that is software or malware that comes along with something else the user has downloaded, sometimes deliberately, sometimes without being aware of it. You'll hear the term drive-by download, downloads that happen without the user asking for it or doing anything to knowingly bring it on. So Trojans, like worms, do their damage with additional new files put on that infected system. And like worms, once you've identified a Trojan, delete it to stop the damage. Now, obviously, it can be more complicated than that sometimes, but that's the general concept and the difference between those three categories. The next major category is rogues, also known as scareware or ransomware. Rogues are programs that look like they're doing something useful, but they're really trying to scare the user into paying up, giving up their credit card to solve an imaginary problem, or ransomware holding the computer or the data files hostage until the user pays that ransom. So, as you know, those have become very common, especially in the last couple of years. They've been around for a long time, but the last couple of years with the FBI virus and its variants, and now CryptoLocker and all the takeoffs on that, that's a huge part of what you're probably dealing with on a regular basis. And the third major category here is rootkits. Rootkits, you probably know, are buried deeply within the operating system itself. They're some of the hardest to detect and the hardest to get rid of. So you need to deal with them separately. But those are the three major categories. Within the rootkits, there are several different types. They've been around since the very early days of viruses. In fact, some of the very earliest viruses were actually rootkits on floppy disks that spread from one floppy to another and onto systems when they were carried from home to work and whatever. But there are really three different types of rootkits that we'll be getting into, not in a lot of detail, but just to let you know that they're out there. The traditional viruses, or traditional varieties of rootkit, would infect the normal Windows components, like Explorer.exe, LSASS.exe, or that sort of thing, or the boot sector or the master boot record of the drive itself. A newer type of rootkit that's been causing real problems for the last few years was TDL3. Now, as it turns out, once the TDL3s came out, there had been TDL1 and TDL2 rootkits before that. But the antivirus programs had pretty well handled those, and it was not until TDL3s that they became a real problem. And unfortunately, that has evolved now into TDL4, which of course does the same thing and some more. And there's also another family of rootkits known as Zero Access. Zero Access has also been around for the last 4 or 5 years, also very deeply buried, hard to detect, and hard to get rid of. They're not TDL3, TDL4 type rootkits, but they're pretty much as difficult to deal with. So those are some of the threats that we're talking about here. From there, I'm going to get into rogues and talk about that in a little bit more detail. Again, I know you know what they are, but just a little bit of review of some examples of what they do, how they operate. Because there's a really important difference between rogues and traditional malware. The rogues are generally very obvious, very annoying, and they usually pop up at startup time. And the first generation of rogues acted like internet security or antivirus programs. They claimed to have found infections. So as soon as you boot it up, you'd get this message from the system tray saying, "Oh, I'm your such antivirus. I found 53 infections. If you give me your credit card, I'll fix them for you." So they were masquerading as security software, and some fairly effectively. All bogus, but they looked legitimate in a lot of cases. The next generation of rogues claimed that your hard drive was failing or had failed. And as part of that, to make it look more believable, they'd frequently hide or block access to your programs and or your data files. And so as far as the user is concerned, their files weren't there anymore, their programs were grayed out, couldn't open them, so yeah, my hard drive really must be failing. I better give them that credit card real quick while they can still fix it. But of course, the latest generation is the ransomware, where they're demanding payment to either use the computer or to access your data files. So here's one example of one of the early ones, Smart Fortress 2012, and this same one has appeared under at least 30 different names, because that's one thing that happens with the rogues. The people that produce them also sell the source code. So other people can buy the source code and customize them, make them their own, give them different names, different colors, different icons, or whatever. But as you can see, this looks pretty typical of what a traditional antivirus program would look like. The same type of selections over here, rogues and trojans and spyware and dialer and all the different categories. Run type, which obviously is supposed to indicate the location where the malware has supposedly been found, the name, and the details. And so the average user looking at that could get a pretty good scare put into them. There are a lot of things when you dig into it deeper that are pretty obviously not as represented, and no point in getting into all of that now, but the main point I want to make on this particular one, which is so common to them, is this whole thing is one big hyperlink. It doesn't matter where you click, it just is going to bury the infection more deeply. And notice there's no skip or ignore or cancel. Also, when it starts, this bar works its way across looking like it's doing something. It's actually just a flash movie playing to make it look like it's having some effect. But at any rate, that was one of the early ones, Smart Fortress 2012, and a lot of other names attached to it. Windows Recovery is one that illustrates a couple of points. For one, the bad guys don't have any qualms about trying to act like Microsoft or a legitimate vendor. That looks very much like the normal Microsoft Advanced Security Center. The colors, the icons, everything else. And surprise, surprise, all of the good things are turned off. And once again, there's no skip or ignore. There's just clean now or some of the other links down here. But again, all that's going to do is bury the infection more deeply until the user gives up the credit card or calls you or me to take care of it. Here's another one that is along the same lines, again, trying to make it look like the hard drive is failing. And notice several different indications here. It's calling it Smart HDD and using Smart. As we all know, Smart is a BIOS function that's been around for a long time to look for symptoms of an impending hard drive failure. And then it's kind of taken off on that to show that your reliability is only 28%, so it's obviously critical. Performance 34% poor, error resistance 14% critical. Your disk is in a critical state. Click here for more Smart details. So once again, trial version, click here to activate. Guess what it's going to ask for then. And then came the FBI virus, which was another real game changer. When it first hit, most of you have probably seen and dealt with that, and it's been through a lot of variations since then. Now, I say the FBI virus, that's what it is in the U.S., but it's also spread worldwide. And whatever country you're in, it will represent itself as being from that national police agency. In the U.K., it's the Scotland Yard Cyber Police, Canada, the Royal Canadian Mounted Cyber Force, or something like that. But the whole essence of it is it says that we're the national police agency and we found something illegal on your computer, so we've locked it down. And at this point, all you can do is go into here and enter the number of the the MoneyGram that you purchased or non-refundable debit card. Of course, the later generations are requiring Bitcoin, and it's even harder to get into. But one of the things that made this especially effective, this little window over here, if the computer has a video camera on it, the user might see themselves right there, either in a still picture that was recorded a few seconds ago or even full motion. But basically it's saying that we found something illegal on the computer, whether it's illegal software, pirated DVDs, videos, or child pornography. But if you pay the fine, then we'll go ahead and release your computer for you. So at any rate, that was the original FBI virus that has morphed a good bit since then. And the latest category of rogues is the encrypting ransomware, starting off with CryptoLocker. And now we're up to about at least the 10th or 12th variant. The most recent as of last week was CryptoWall 3.0. But all of them are doing pretty much the same thing. Once they get on the computer, they go out and infect all the files that the user is likely to be interested in or have value to them. All of the spreadsheets, all the word processing documents, all the databases, all the contact management, but very importantly, all the photos and videos and things that, again, the user is going to be very concerned about and doesn't want to lose. Now, I actually wrote about this in my book back in 2005, so the technique of encrypting ransomware is not new. But what's new is that back then it was a pretty crude method of encryption and fairly easy to crack. Ever since CryptoLocker and all of the recent variants, they are, for all practical purposes, uncrackable. They're following best practices in encryption, and the user is not going to get their data files back other than by either paying the ransom or, much better solution, restoring from a backup. So we're learning pretty quickly and pretty dramatically how many users don't have any backups. And in fact, there are at least a couple of reports of police agencies that have paid the ransom to get their files back because they didn't have backups, and they would lose all their evidence on cases if they didn't pay for it. So the good news about that, if you can call it that, is that so far all of the encrypting ransomware that I have heard about, if you pay the ransom, they really do give you the encryption key. You get your data files back. You'll hear mostly police agencies saying, no, never pay these people, and obviously none of us want to pay the ransom or be party to them making money off of their criminal act, because it is criminal. But that doesn't mean they're ever going to be prosecuted or caught or anything happen to them. But the reality is that from a business standpoint, a lot of people have made the decision, well, this is kind of my stupid tax. I didn't have backups. I'm going to have to pay to recover. Now, here's another example of the very early CryptoLocker. It only asked for $100. That pretty quickly went to $300, and that's kind of been the standard for the last year or so. CryptoWall 3.0 that just came out last week is up to $500, and if you don't pay within 3 days, it goes to $1,000. And there's a lot of speculation those numbers are going to go up and up. But at any rate, that's the whole generation we're dealing with of encrypting ransomware, the different types of rogues that are out there. So, with that kind of as background and a starting point, how do you deal with malware? Well, there are really only about 3 answers to that. By far the most common, and I touched on this a few minutes ago, the average tech is going to run one or multiple scans with different anti-malware programs. And the second option is, again, to nuke and pave, back up all the data, wipe everything out, reload the system from scratch. Again, a horrible solution for most of your clients or users. And the third option is to follow a methodology to methodically find and remove all the malware and repair any damage that's been done. I think you can guess which one I vote for. Now, I've been presenting these workshops, the webinars, and full workshops for almost 6 years now. In the process, I've talked to several hundred tech support organizations and individuals that are doing tech support, and I always ask you, what do you do, what kind of results do you get, and how's it going? And obviously some of the people that I ask those questions are not giving me straight answers, but it's pretty easy to figure that out. But of just the ones that give me credible answers, these numbers have really not changed significantly in the last 6 years. Over 2/3 of them, their answer is they scan with multiple scanning programs. Almost 1/4 of them, their normal approach to dealing with malware is to just wipe and reload. They feel like that's the only solution, or it's the only cost-effective solution, or the only way they know they can get rid of it, or whatever. Only 9% follow a defined methodology. And unfortunately, that's the first round. And in that other category of relying on scans by popular software or the defined methodology, a lot of them, after some period of time, just kind of give up and go ahead and nuke and pave. So that's kind of a last resort, and they're definitely going to lose money and probably lose a client when they do. So typical results. From all these people I've talked to, and again, these numbers have not changed significantly over the last 6 years, they'll spend anywhere from 3 hours to 3 days on malware cleanup. And now when I say any of those numbers, I'm not necessarily talking about that much time hands-on keyboard, full-time tech, but I am talking about the client or the user being without the use of their computer for that period of time. But overall, the median of all the people I talked to would be about 1 full day to do a single virus cleanup. And most of them admit there's some they just haven't been able to get rid of, and that some of them have come back. So once again, in a lot of cases, they decide all I can do is nuke and pave. So that's the kind of results we're talking about for the average shops out there. So I'm going to talk about each of those in a little bit more detail. First of all, running one or multiple scans. That's what I call the superstition or the voodoo approach, because it's really kind of a black box. You just throw enough stuff at it and hope that it works, but you don't really know what's going on or how effective it has been. And so if that's the approach you're taking, the first obvious question is which programs are you going to scan with, how many and which ones? And there are a lot to choose from. There are over 60 different antivirus, anti-malware programs out there. And I've listed here strictly in alphabetical order the 3 that are most commonly mentioned: ComboFix, Malwarebytes, and Super Anti-Spyware. Those are absolutely not in my order of preference. Those are in alphabetical order. So those are 3 out of 60 or so. Some people I talk to, some shops routinely run as many as about 8 different scans. So next question is which one do you run first? And then which one is next? Which one is after that? And that can make a big difference in the effectiveness and the time it takes. Also, with each one of those programs, they're going to have different options, different settings, different types of scans they're doing. There's a quick scan, a flash scan, a smart scan, a deep scan, or whatever. And so there again, it matters which one you choose. Now here's one of the dirty little secrets of some of those programs, because a lot of them have been around for a long time meaning 10 years or longer, and they still have current definitions. And so people who have been using those programs for all that period of time may be lulled into a false sense of security thinking they're completely up to date. Well, here's the deal. They may be completely up to date for the things they know to look for, but a lot of those older programs don't even know about some of the new infection methods. So it's really important which ones you use and how much you trust. Also, even the best antivirus, anti-malware programs still don't do a very good job of detecting rootkits or getting rid of them. So that's an additional challenge. The other thing that happens with some of the programs, especially the ones that are well known and that do a good job, they may actually be blocked from running by the malware itself. Malwarebytes. A lot of malware will keep Malwarebytes from being able to run. So that's kind of the price they pay for their success. But maybe the worst part of it in terms of your ability to make any money at it is each one, as you know, could easily run for an hour or longer, or sometimes much longer. So if you're talking about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 scans, each one running for an hour or 2, then you're certainly looking at least a day or 2 worth of just scanning time. So the other option, re-imaging, wiping and reloading, what I call the GS approach. And the GS stands for a well-known big box retailer in the U.S. I won't further identify them. I think most of you know who I'm talking about, or you can figure it out. But in fairness to them, most of the big box retailers take the same approach. Rather than training their people to know anything, they just say, convince the client it's best for them. If you back everything up, wipe and reload, that'll be best all around. Well, I respectfully disagree. Again, there are times it may be appropriate. That would mainly be for enterprise installations where you've got hundreds or thousands of computers that are all imaged off the same network drive. They don't have any locally installed software or data, only one user on each one. Sure, in that environment you can download a fresh image in 15 or 20 minutes, have at it. But I'm talking mostly about small businesses or home users. And for them, it's never what the user wants. And I'll go so far as to say it could be catastrophic for a small business or home user. Because there's one thing that I can absolutely 100% guarantee you about any wipe and reload: you're going to lose something. You just don't know what. Whether it's programs, data, settings, users, and you may not know, or the user may not know, until a long time after the fact. And then it'd be way too late to do anything about it. So that's the big downside of a wiping and reloading, plus the fact the computer never looks the same after it's done. Something's going to be different. And as you know, a lot of users, if you put one icon in a different place, it kind of freaks them out. But maybe the worst part of it overall is the time it takes. Now, when I'm saying 6 or 8 hours, I'd be real surprised if anybody could do a good wipe and reload in 6 or 8 hours. As you know, it's more commonly 16, 24 to 24 hours or longer, and good luck in getting paid for anything like that amount of time. So that's the downside, and those are the 2 major approaches that are taken by most techs. So now we're going to get into the methodology that I developed and have refined over the years, and I'm going to give you the whole thing right here. You can start using it as soon as the webinar is over. I'm not saying this is the only way, but I'm saying this is the way that works very well for me and several hundred people that I've trained over the years. So first step is to find and remove any rogue software. Second, identify and remove any traditional malware. And as part of that, find and remove the activation point for that malware so they can't come back. And once all that's done, finish it up by finding and removing any rootkit infections. So at 100,000 foot level, that's everything we're talking about. So obviously I'm going to go deeper into that and show you more of the details of how that works and what you can do along the way. As far as dealing with rogues, one of the things that makes that more complicated is that a lot of them will throw up roadblocks to get in the way of things you would normally be doing. You may not be able to run Task Manager, probably can't run regedit, you might not be able to access the internet, or possibly Windows Explorer, MS-config, or other system tools that you're used to using in dealing with the malware issue. So here's a generic approach that will work for most rogues. There may be a few additional pieces required in certain cases, but this approach overall should work for just about any rogue. So boot into safe mode, command prompt only. From there, do a system restore. And from a command prompt, there's the actual command you'll use, rstrui.exe, and go back to a time before the rogue was in control. Now, that assumes that system restore is going to work, which it usually will, but there again, some malware could actually break it. But if it works, then go back to a time before the rogue was in control. That does not, in most cases, remove the rogue from the computer. But if it's on there but not active, then that will take away most of the roadblocks that have been getting in the way of doing the things you want to do. So at that point, I would do a scan with Malwarebytes, and that should be able to find and remove most rogues. So once you've done that, then go ahead and boot normally and dig deeper looking for other malware. But again, getting rid of the rogues is the first step. When it comes to traditional malware, one of the biggest things that makes that such a challenge is the fact that the bad guys have gone to such great extent to keep the user from knowing their computer's infected. Because remember, the purpose of malware in the first place is to make money. The longer that computer stays infected, the more money the bad guys are making. As soon as the user sees some indication the computer's infected, they're going to do something about it. They're going to call you or take it to Geek Squad or, to an unnamed big box retailer or whatever and get it taken care of. And as soon as that happens, the bad guy's gravy train stops. So they put a lot of effort into keeping the user from knowing they're infected, and even in a lot of cases keeping the tech from knowing the computer's infected. So no obvious symptoms of infection in a lot of cases. Another thing that's not brand new, but it's become more common recently, is what's known as a buddy system. What that means is, if you're following a methodology, go through Task Manager and see the different processes that are running, you may identify something that you know is malware, or you suspect is malware. You terminate it, you kill it, and think that solved the problem. Well, what you may not have seen is there's another process running whose whole purpose in life is to see if you have killed the main malware process. And if you have, it will either restart it or reinstall it or even re-download it in some cases. So that's what's known as the buddy system. I've even heard about, I have not seen, but I've heard about three-way buddy systems. So they can get very sophisticated about detecting the fact that you have tried to get rid of them and bring them right back. And that's one of the points I want to make here, is that the malware we're dealing with today ranges from pretty simplistic to very complex and getting more and more sophisticated all the time. But again, they all have a payload, an objective, what they're trying to do to make money. And you know about all these. They're stealing stuff, setting a backdoor, a keylogger, turning it into a member of a botnet, spreading to other computers, or whatever. There's almost no limit to the different types of payloads and how they can make money at it. And so, again, the procedure that you'll use to identify those is to start off with Task Manager and look at the actual processes, figure out which ones are malicious. Once you've found a malicious process, then you need to get rid of it. And I'm going to actually go into Task Manager here and show you firsthand what we're talking about. So bear with me for just a second while I get the pieces that we need. I need to change this, and here's Task Manager. Now, you'll notice that my task manager probably looks different from what you're used to. Question, Bryce? Go ahead.
I was about to say we lost visual for a second, but it's back.
Okay, good. Yeah, as I switched over, I had to change one of the settings so you could see everything that's going on. So on my task manager, I've got 120 processes running right now, which is more than you want to have, but again, I've got a lot of stuff going on. So ideally, when you're doing a malware cleanup, you want to start clean. A normal start. I'm not talking about the start where you disable all the automatic things to start up normally. So the point is you want to see it the way the user sees it, but before you start opening browsers or email or anything else. And so in going through Task Manager, what you're looking for is things that initially just jump off the screen at you in terms of being something malicious. There are a lot of clues, and we don't have time enough to get into all of those, but as an example, some malware will show up as a 31-character name that's a combination of caps and lowercase letters that don't stand for anything or spell anything, or there may be some numbers mixed in there too. Maybe an all-numeric executable name, different things like that. But the main thing that's a good starting point after you've been through that kind of first pass is to look at each entry for consistency. And after you've done a lot of this, you recognize most of them and know what they are. They don't require any further investigation. But you see one that you don't recognize, what you want to do is look at the executable and compare that to the executable here, and more importantly, the folder that it's in and the description here. Now, this is based on Windows 7 or Windows 8. On the older operating systems, you don't have all this information readily available to you. You may have to do some more research to dig it out. But the point is a couple of things. For one, most malware will not bother to take the time to put anything in description. So if you just scroll through there quickly and look for anything that doesn't have a description, that's something you want to check out right away. Now, having said that, they could certainly put something in there that sounds legitimate that wouldn't be. But for instance, if you see something you don't recognize and look over here and it's in a temporary internet folder and the description here says Microsoft something or other, pretty good chance it's bogus. So point is, you're looking for one at a time. You find one that you have good reason to suspect is malicious, and then you want to terminate it. There are a couple of ways you can do that. Of course, the way that we're used to doing is click on it and come down here to End Process. But actually a better way, a more complete way, would be to right-click on it and End Process Tree. So that will also end the process on other components that may be underneath there, may have been called by that main module. So once you've done that, then one of two things is going to happen. Either Windows is going to keep running normally, or it's not. And if it doesn't, if that kills Windows, then that lets you know that that particular module you just terminated is required. Now the good news is, when you do it here, when you just terminate the process, it's going to come back when you reboot. So you haven't done any permanent damage, you can reboot and pick it up from there. And again, there's a much more involved process to go into all the possible variations, but the point is, you're looking for processes that are part of the problem, getting rid of them one at a time. So with that, we'll go back to the slideshow and pick up with some of the other pieces. Because once you've been through all that, terminate the process. And then you need to figure out how it got there in the first place, whether it was activated somewhere in the registry or whether the user had manually started it up or whatever. Then you need to keep it from coming back. And again, in most cases, it will be in the registry. So you need to find it in the registry, get rid of it so it won't come back. And then the program itself needs to either be deleted or cleaned, depending on whether it's a virus, a rogue, or a Trojan or worm or whatever. So exactly how you deal with it is going to vary depending on the particular type of malware that it is. Then you also need to be able to block the ability to keep it from coming back. And that too will be related to the buddy processes you may need to further detect and get rid of, and some other things that come into play. But the point is, once you finish that one, then go back and look for the next one. So it's just like the shampoo commercials, lather, rinse, repeat. Now, what you're going to find in a lot of cases, especially if you had a rogue on there, once you got rid of it, chances are there is traditional malware that has already been on there for some period of time. Generally, you get the call or the machine comes into your shop when the rogue shows up. But the reality is, a lot of the machines had already been infected long before that. In fact, a pretty widely quoted statistic indicates that about 80% of all computers right now are infected by malware. But there again, they've done a good enough job of hiding it that the user doesn't know it. They haven't called you about it or brought the computer into you. So chances are they're going to be anywhere from about 3 to 7, or kind of the typical range of the number of infected or malicious processes you're going to need to deal with. So that's the most time-consuming part of this process. That also gets us up to pretty much what I intended to cover for the day and up to your homework assignment, because there's a lot of additional information available to you for free on the web. And if this is something that's of interest to you, if you want to dig deeper and learn more, your next step will be to kind of do a little bit of that on your own and be prepared for what we're going to pick up with next week, which is the rest of dealing with the traditional malware and then into rootkits and kind of a wrap up from there. So as far as your homework assignment, there's another program that I assume most of you are familiar with and hopefully have been using called Process Explorer. Process Explorer, as you probably know, is like a task manager on steroids. It's the same basic information, but a lot more of it, and very useful, especially in a malware context. So that was written by this guy named Mark Russinovich. Mark had a company called SysInternals that he started over 10 years ago. Developed a lot of good system-type software and things that kind of, he was saying all along, these are things Microsoft should have included in the operating system. And so he was kind of a thorn in their side for quite a few years. But the good news is, a few years ago, Microsoft actually acquired his company. And by the time they did, he had, I think, 84 different programs. And Microsoft is still not only supporting some of them, but also encouraging him to keep them up to date. And they've also got him kind of on the speaking circuit. He appears at a lot of the Microsoft events. So what I'm going to recommend to you as a homework assignment is to go find one of the recent videos that Mark did. And there's the correct spelling of his name if you want to make note of that. And again, SysInternals was his company. This particular presentation I'm talking about was one he did less than a year ago, which was, I think, March or April of last year at TechEd North America. The presentation runs about an hour and 26 minutes, and it talks about basically malware removal using the SysInternals tools. And so he demonstrates Process Explorer and some of the other tools he developed and how those all figure into this. So that should be enough information. In fact, I'll go back there and just leave that information up so that if you didn't write it all down, that should be everything you need to find that particular video. And again, it runs about an hour and a half, an hour and 26 minutes. So even if you don't watch it all at one sitting, if you watch 10 or 15 minutes at a time, then come back to it. I've watched it myself at least 5 or 6 times now. I get something more out of it every time. So Mark, in addition to being a great programmer, is also a very good presenter. He's entertaining, he's funny, he speaks well, you can hear him, you can understand him, and he has a sense of humor. So I think you'll enjoy it as well as getting some good information out of it. So when we start back up next week, we'll pick up where we left off and again get into the rest of the methodology and show you what you can do to meet all those objectives that we talked about early in the webinar. So with that, Bryce, I assume you probably have some questions sitting there that need answering. Anything you need to pass along to me?
Yep, Tom Gamba asked, do you know much about the Conifer virus and the damage it caused? Just to jog your memory a bit, because there's a million names out there. This one was from 2008, and a dictionary attacked administrator passwords to propagate forming a botnet. Do you remember much about that one?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Conficker, I think, still holds the record for the most infected computers. In fact, I saw something last year that indicated there are probably still over 5 million computers still infected by it. So it was very widespread, and it did mostly attack the larger organizations. I didn't really see much of that in the small mid-sized business market or the home market, but it was definitely very widespread. And like most of them, once it's been out there for a while, the antivirus vendors pretty well have it figured out in terms of the removal. And so anytime you know exactly that there's a specific piece of malware, it's pretty easy to find a solution for it. And one of the things I tell people is that answers are easy to find. The hard part is coming up with the right questions. But yes, that's definitely been one of them that was very widespread, and it seems so long ago now. We've come a long way since then.
Yeah, I remember the days of ones like MS-SAN and LoveSAN and a few others. That's going back a fair bit. That's much further back than I thought it was, actually.
Yeah,
almost 10 years ago, I think.
I was actually doing an on-site presentation at a big utility on the west coast of the U.S. It was a 2-day workshop I was doing, and on the second day I got there, everything was down. They had been hit by the LoveBug virus. So that goes back probably close to 10 years also.
We also have Derek Salisbury. He says last week he installed some software. Someone installed some software and filled the user's hard drive with full of temp files in the app data temp file. removing 9,000 files. Oh no, sorry. Let me rephrase that. It looks like it's spread to about 90,000 files. And he asked, would that be called a worm?
Yes, that's almost certainly a worm, and in fact, just the way that things have been going recently, I would make a pretty sure bet that was an infection called Powellix. Powellix is one that a lot of people don't know by name, but it's been very common in the last month or so. Actually, it's been kind of quiet for the last few weeks. But Powellix is a new category of virus, and in fact, it doesn't exactly neatly fit into any of the categories because it's kind of like a rootkit, but not really. What's different about Powellix? Well, there are a lot of things that are different about it, but the first thing that got people's attention is what's called fileless malware. When you're infected by a Powellix infection, there are no infected files on the computer. It injects the malicious code directly into the registry. So you can scan that hard drive all day long with as many anti-malware programs as you like. They're not going to find any infected files. It is in the registry, and you have to know exactly where to look for and what the symptoms are and how to get rid of it. But as far as symptoms, the main thing that it does is generates a lot of processes. It's running multiple DLL-host.exe processes, multiple meaning usually a couple of dozen. Most commonly somewhere in the range of 25 or 30 separate DLL-host.exe processes. Also, each one of those is doing a lot of connection on the internet, trying to communicate with the command and control server. So once a Powellix infection hits, performance just slows to a crawl. The machine is still running, and you can eventually get in there to run Task Manager or some of the command prompt, command line things to see what's going on. But it's a real resource hog, and I actually have an article I wrote on that summarizes information from about 10 different vendors as well as 4 separate removal procedures. So if you're dealing with Powellix or want more information, I'll send out in the replay link also a link to download that article. It's a 4-page article, though, that does reference 10 different vendors.
It's all changing. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's not about picture.jpeg.exe. It's now we're seeing stuff that's completely in the registry.
Yep.
Actually, speaking of the registry, Sam James has a question. He says, to clean the registry, would you literally search for that process file in the registry, check paths, and delete after a backup, of course? Would you search for the process in the registry?
That's one way you can do it. There are also, well, just kind of a short version here, there are over 200 registry keys that I have identified as being likely hiding places for malware. And there's some tools I have available that take you directly into those keys and look for them and clean them up for you. So we'll get into that in the session next week. But yes, you certainly could do a search in regedit, in the registry, for a particular executable and see where it is and kill it. But I prefer a holistic approach that looks at everything kind of all in one big sequential view.
Tom Gamba again asked, can you address going into the startup area of MS-config to stop processes as a means to stop reinfections?
Yeah, and the answer is that's not going to stop the more sophisticated ones for a lot of reasons. MS-config actually shows you what is in the registry in 3 different run keys, and there could be as many as 13 run keys. So MS-config doesn't even look in 10 out of those 13. In addition to that, it's pretty easy for the bad guys to see if you have unchecked one of those entries, and they can go right back behind you and recheck it. And they may not do it by physically rechecking that box. So you look at MS-config, it may still look unchecked, but behind the scenes they have actually gone ahead and restarted it in another place. So,
would you recommend something like auto runs for that? Because I know MS-config is pretty primitive. Auto runs, I think, was won by Cisternals as well.
Right. Auto runs is much more comprehensive, and it's there's a lot more in auto runs than you'll ever need to really pay much attention to. In fact, on my machine, when I look at auto runs, and I didn't count the exact number, but I counted the number that were showing up per screen and the total number of screens, and it was something like 1,700 separate locations in the registry that were starting up automatically. And so that's kind of overwhelming. But AutoRuns definitely serves a useful purpose, and anybody that follows that homework assignment and watches what Mark Russinovich has to say about it, he does talk about AutoRuns and how and when to use it to keep programs from starting up automatically.
Susan Ware asked, I get a lot of home user clients asking how to protect themselves. What protection do you recommend, and what do you run on your PC?
Great question, and unfortunately, as we all know, there is no 100% solution. I will tell you what I run on mine, and it's not necessarily what I recommend for everybody, but as far as actual antivirus, internet security type program, I still run Viper. I've been a Viper fan since the early days. There's some things I don't like about it as much now as I did in the early days, but there's some things I like more about it. Now, having said that, there is no antivirus program that is up to the challenge of protecting a computer. It has to be a full internet security suite these days. And I know over the years the internet security suites have caused other problems, especially when there's a firewall involved, which there usually is. And yes, you may have to do some training to get it to communicate with the printer and that sort of thing, but there's so many threats out there, so many different types, that every user absolutely has to have the malicious website blocking, things like that, especially with the CryptoLocker or CryptoWall 2.0 and 3.0. They've been spreading by infecting the ad servers that serve up the ads that show up on the widely used pages like AOL.com, Yahoo.com, HuffingtonPost.com, Match.com. And so without malicious website blocking, those would get right through. Now, along with that, those will typically take advantage of known flaws in programs like Flash, Java, Adobe Reader, things like that. So it's obviously critical that all the Windows updates stay current and all the applications, especially Office and the widely used applications, but most especially the programs like Java, Flash, QuickTime, RealPlayer, all of those. In addition to that, there's still the usual issues of user behavior, but again, the social engineering has gotten so sophisticated now that it may look very legitimate to click on that link. Oh, I've got a package and it wasn't able to be delivered. Well, let me open that zip file and see what was in it. So happens all the time. And in fact, literally this week, I got a panic call from a client who's also a good friend that he was almost shaking when I got there. He had this email from the IRS. And of course, as soon as I looked at it, I said, don't lose any sleep over this one. There were about a dozen different things I picked up on right away. But the point is, this is a bright guy, and it was enough to really intimidate him. So, and he had opened the attachment. Now, fortunately, that attachment was actually a doc file, .doc, which I don't think the IRS is going to send an attachment at all, much less a doc file. But his office was up to date, and so whatever exploit it was trying to take advantage of didn't work. But as you know, there are plenty of users that do not have Office up to date. And in fact, there's still some running Office 2000 or Office 2002. And yeah, the vulnerabilities just go on and on. So point is, it takes a multi-layered approach. But one thing that I touched on earlier, but I can't really overemphasize enough, is the importance of backups. Because especially with encrypting ransomware, that has made so much money for the bad guys. And once again, there are exploit kits out there. So if you want to get into the ransomware business yourself, for about $3,000 you can. And I'm sure a lot of people will be. So everybody needs to have an off-site, offline backup of all their important data files.
What are your thoughts about our registry cleanup programs?
Is this a trick question? The answer is I don't believe in any of them. To me, best case, there's very minimal help that any legitimate, well-done registry cleaning program could do. There is massive amount of damage that any program like that could do, and the great majority of them are actually malware in one form or another anyway. So I don't use any of them. There are.
I usually remove them as soon as I see them, and they're quite aggressive as well. I get emails from them almost every day asking me to write about them. I'm just like, yeah, no.
Yeah. It's just it's a whole category that I'm just, like you. I automatically remove them from any client's machine I see them on.
Let's see what else there is. Where do you recommend to learn more about working with the registry in regards to malware?
There's so much that applies about the registry, and in fact, as you know, I have a a full-day workshop, and a big part of that is about the registry. Short of that, I have taught the registry for over 10 years in a lot of different contexts, and so I feel like what I present is what really needs to be said, and that is not available anywhere else. There again, you can ask plenty of questions. You can do a Google search on anything in particular, but as far as getting an overview, the last good book I saw about the registry was actually, there were a couple of them back in the days of Windows 2000, and I haven't seen anything since then. There's an article in the Microsoft Knowledge Base that has some very specific information about the registry, but there again, it's so specific that it's more the type of things you could find by doing a Google search, as opposed to getting a whole context of how these pieces fit together, what some of the things mean, the relationships, and that sort of thing. So the short answer is, without sounding too self-promotional, is I don't know any good source of information or training about the registry other than what I have, which we'll be talking about more next week.
John Easterling asks, what role does the DNS server selection have in your anti-malware strategy?
Not a whole lot. I talk about it, and one way that you could get some additional protection is to use a DNS server other than the one that your internet service provider is offering. And in fact, anybody that doesn't have my booklet, I have a booklet called Advanced PC Troubleshooting Techniques, Tips, Tools, and Tricks that has 35 separate tips in it. One of them is about DNS and some of the alternate servers that are available for free. And so anybody that doesn't have that can get a free copy just by sending an email to booklet, B-O-O-K-L-E-T, at thevirusdoc.com, THEVIRUSDOC.com. Just send an email to that address. It will automatically send you a link to download that booklet. It's a 22-page booklet with 35 separate tips in it.
Here's two questions here. One is, what are your thoughts about CCleaner? And what are your thoughts about cloud-based antivirus programs?
Okay. CCleaner, good program, good reputable company, and I do use and recommend it for cleaning files. As I said a few minutes ago, I don't use anything, even CCleaner, for cleaning the registry. Again, I don't see any potential significant benefit from it. And just a little bit more about that, because I didn't get into quite this much detail, but the whole concept of a registry cleaning program is, we find all the orphan entries in your registry and get rid of them. Well, so what? The only benefit of that would be if you were scanning the registry from start to finish looking for something, which, yes, every now and then you're going to do a find in the registry, and that could conceivably make it go faster. But the reality is, the normal operation of the registry, Windows is looking for the value of a particular key and goes directly to it. So the best registry cleaners that I've found might get rid of maybe as much as a megabyte out of the registry. A typical registry on a Windows 7 machine is over 200 megabytes. So you're talking about half of 1% smaller size. Now, who's running out of hard drive space these days? So there again, I see no worthwhile benefit and so much potential downside, even a good, reputable company and program like CCleaner, that I don't do it. Now I've forgotten the other question.
The other one was a cloud-based antivirus.
Cloud-based antivirus, as far as the ability to scan, sure, that's as good and can be as up-to-date as anything. One of the problems with that is that it is a step removed from the machine that you're actually looking at and scanning on. And so traditional malware, that would probably, there's a good chance that the right cloud-based antivirus could detect it and clean it. I'd say much less so for rootkits and more sophisticated malware, and especially when you get into the buddy processes and things like that. So I'm not completely down on cloud-based antivirus, but there's not a solution in that category that I really recommend.
This was Dennis Pillow. He asked, he has a customer that has a system using a wireless connection to Verizon. His data has jumped up 14 gig of data use. If I look at the processes, is this the proper method to start?
And I missed part. I got through the Verizon, the wireless, but what his daughter was doing what?
The client, the data usage jumped up about 14 gig. I guess he suspects it might be a virus of some sort. He looked at the processes, but is this the proper method to start?
Well, that is the proper method, looking through the processes and making a determination of what's legitimate, what's malicious, And there again, the homework assignment will go into more details about what's available in Process Explorer. We just looked at Task Manager, and Process Explorer has a lot more information available. And so I think you can get some good additional answers from watching that homework assignment.
Jason Kahn asks, what is your preferred type of cloud backup solution?
As you know, there are a lot of cloud backup solutions out there, and the name brands, I'm sure the biggest in terms of number of users would be Carbonite, and probably Mozy is number 2, and I think probably CrashPlan would be number 3. But it happens, I was reading an article the other day that compared 30-some different cloud-based or cloud-based backup services, so there are a lot of them out there. And presumably a lot of people on the webinar are resellers of different cloud-based services. And so the two main things I look for there, one would obviously be capacity, and most of them are going to have enough space available to back up whatever the client or user is going to want. But the other probably most important thing, beside, well, actually the most important is, are they still going to be in business tomorrow? So much as I'm a small business and like to support small business as much as possible, the reality is there's so much at stake with cloud-based backups that I'm really more comfortable dealing with and recommending to my clients a big company that has the staying power, that has the money behind them. And so with that said, the other important consideration is be sure that it's a generational backup. And what I mean by that, that's more of an old mainframe term that you don't hear so much in the PC context, but the concept is that at its core, a backup service, what triggers a backup is something has changed on a file. And unfortunately, there's some of those backup services that when a file changes, that replaces the previous one on the backups. Well, if you get hit by an encrypting ransomware that encrypts the file, well, that's changed. So that's now the current backup. And if that backup service is not keeping the previous version, and the one before that, and the one before that, and some way of going back more than just the current, most recent one, then you might as well not even have a backup. So there again, the major providers that I know of do exactly that. And you can restore either to the last one, the one before that, or some number of generations back, or to a previous date and time. And the good news, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the good news about the encrypting ransomware is that the user knows pretty quickly when it's hit them. And so if they have one of those services in place, if they've got the backups from yesterday, then it should be a simple, quick call. And unfortunately, at least with Carbonite, my experience has been that you cannot directly roll back to a previous date. You can restore a particular file, but at least the last time I looked at it, there was not the ability to restore a complete folder or a group of files to a particular date. But Carbonite had a procedure they could do for you. It may take a day or two, but they did that. It worked just fine. So if you've let it go more than and most of these have a timer on it. If you don't pay up within 3 days or 5 days or 7 days or some period of time, then the cost of the ransom increases, and at some point supposedly they delete the keys altogether. So if you are dealing with an encrypting ransomware situation, it is important to make the decision and deal with it as quickly as possible.
I strongly agree with the generational stuff. I see a lot of people using Dropbox as a backup tool, but since we all know that's a syncing tool, as in match the files between two computers, it's a pretty bad option if you accidentally delete it on one machine, because the other machine's going to go, well, I see you deleted it on the other machine, so I'm going to delete it here as well.
Yeah. That's different from a backup service.
Yes.
And to be fair to them, they say that. They say we are not a backup service. And so people that are paying attention shouldn't fall into that trap, but I'm sure that some have.
What do you think of Spybot as the anti-malware tool? That one's from Gary. I'm not going to try and pronounce the surname. I'm sorry.
Let's be generous and say that's an example of a program that was good 10 years ago that I don't recommend these days.
Yeah, I haven't seen that update in a long time.
A general statement I make, and without meaning to step on too many toes here, but some deserve it, any program that has the word spy in it is probably obsolete.
Yep. The rest of the questions, people are asking, when is the next session?
Good question. It will be 1 week from today at the same time next Thursday. And again, for the people that are going to hear this on the replay that weren't able to get in live, I apologize for that and expect to have that fixed so that everybody that wants to be on next week can be. Now, having said that, I realize that there's some people that maybe this was more detailed than you wanted to go into. It's not that big a part of what you're doing, and so I expect fewer of the people that are on today to be on next week. But if there's more, that's fine too. So we'll definitely have a lot more ground to cover, and especially if you have a chance to do the homework between now and then, there's a lot of good information out there.
Yeah, I'll do one more technical question. Do you have any recommended rootkit killers? Like this person, Ian Bard, asks about TDSS.
There are actually about 4 anti-rootkit programs that I talk about in the full workshop, and I'm not trying to deduct the question as much as just say that it all depends, because there are different types of rootkits, different symptoms you need to look for, and so no one right answer. But yes, MBAR, Malwarebytes Anti-Rootkit, is a good program. TDSS Killer is a good program. Hitman Pro is a good program. And so all of those are anti-rootkit programs that I do like and recommend. Now, having said that, as you can tell from some of the earlier remarks, my methodology does not involve a bunch of scans by a bunch of programs. But when you talk about scanning for rootkits, those typically go pretty quickly. And so there are times that you might even need to scan with all 3 of those.
Someone else, where can we get the recorded session? I will be posting, I'll be firing off a link in the same way that I let you know about the webinar initially. And someone also asked for the booklet email address you mentioned before. I'll get that off you, and I can also send that out into the into the message.
Yeah, and I know that's something that you had been making available to your subscribers before, and so I assume that most of them either have it or know how they can get access to it. But yes, it's still available, and I do update it periodically. So, and I actually have 4 more tips in mind to be added to it. So if you want to click the same link in about a week, it may be different from what it is today.
Yep. Looks like the rest of them are thank you. So thank you for this. It's been, I think we have a lot to go on, and I think all of us are looking forward to the next one where we're getting a little bit more depth.
Great. Well, Bryce, thank you for your help and for putting me in touch with your group. And I say your group, I'm part of your group, as you know. So it's a good community to be a part of. And so I look forward to seeing everybody that wants to be on next week and pick it up from where we left off.
Oh, so one last thing is, anybody who is listening to this as a recorded session and you have questions, just write them down, and we'll try and answer them on the next session on Thursday.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you. We'll be in touch.